popped up and then disappeared, so I wasn't sure what was going on there.
Yeah, it was distorted when I called in, so I had to call back again. But now it sounds good. So thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Delighted that we get to be here and get back into our regular routine. The last month has been rather busy and delightful, getting to spend time with all of our almost all of our grandkids. There's still two missing from this trip, but a week of holding a newborn was awesome. Got to spend several hours just hanging out in the space of Lincoln Elias, who is now in his 7th week, and lots of time with Arya Rain, with Kaylee Joe, and the early part of the journey was with Krista. We were in St. Louis with Adeline and Avery Catherine. So had a wonderful month. And excuse our interruptions when we were traveling. We're not able to do the show. I hope that the shows that were played were meaningful. I know I got texts from several people. One in particular who, one of the shows, he was in his 3rd listening to it. It really opened some spaces for him. So you might go back and check out some of those shows. And other than that, welcome. Delighted that you're here. Our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you're listening to the show directly, and then if you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel, and we'll get to have a conversation. So if we can be of any support, if you have any questions, any way we can support you, any comment, then just call into the show, or if you're already listening, push 1, and we'll have a conversation. Jeanie, did you share with our audience the insight that Arya had about her grandmothers? Did we do that one the other day?
I'm not sure if we mentioned it or not, but it was powerful.
Yeah, it was really sweet. Arya's other grandmother had a bit of a meltdown and was not in that connected space, even in regard to Arya, which was kind of surprising. And as Jeanie went to sort of comfort Arya at watching her grandmother in that kind of disturbed space, Arya rather insightfully simply offered, "Oh, Nini, she's just forgotten who she is." She knew exactly what was going on. And so we're working on remembering, becoming members once again of the truth of who we are, functioning really, truly as human beings, as the presence of love, and more committed to that state. So, Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? Anything happening in the chat room? Any questions through email or the app?
No questions that we haven't answered. And Yinka's with us in the chat room, so welcome, Yinka.
Welcome, young lady.
And nobody has a hand up. Just a quick reminder to those of you who are part of the Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing, we are doing that this coming Saturday. And so Michael will be sending you a text to pick your numbers to do your Mind Shifter. And I believe we do still owe them an updated list, but I'll have to go back and check. There's been so much go on this past month.
That's true.
So I guess all clear to take off with Thomas.
All right. Let's say hello to Tom. And see what he has to share with us. For those who haven't been with us recently, last, I'm not even sure what time frame, we've been delving into the book of Thomas, one of the scriptural texts which was not canonized by the Council of Nicaea. And so we're going through the sayings. It's an interesting text. It's a different format than most of the scriptures, in that rather than being a story, rather than being a narrative, it's just a series of sayings, wisdom teachings of Yeshua, which some purport to be the secret teachings. You know, if you read the classic scriptures, you'll notice Yeshua talks about to those who were not engaged, really truly engaged in the teachings, he spoke in parables. And then there was a secret teaching that was given to those who had the brain cells, those who could hear something different. And so these sayings are those in the Gospel of Thomas, purportedly written down by Thomas Didymus, and taking us into a deeper realm, a deeper place in the thought structure of this man, Yeshua. And so we're heading into statement 46. Or 45 we had covered last, and it says, they do not gather grapes from thorns, nor pluck figs from camel thistles. They do not yield fruit. A good man brings forth good things from his treasure. An evil man brings forth evil things from his evil treasure, which is in his heart. And treasure being the content, the mass content of the mind. And the heart being the unconscious, for the average person being the storehouse of most people's treasure. That is what they value most, and therefore runs their perception, runs their mind, runs their mouth, and runs their lives. And so one who has, remember, as the word evil is used here in Aramaic, the word evil isn't the Greek monstrosity. The word sin is not the Greek monstrosity we've been given. The word sin in Aramaic is simply an archery term that means off the mark. If you pulled back your bow and you fired an arrow and you missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin, you're off the mark. And if you missed the target altogether, the scorekeeper would yell evil, like you really missed it here. And so this particular saying, 45, is to recognize that by one's fruit, by the words they speak, by the deeds they perform, you know the contents of one's own unconscious mind, or your own. So if you recognize that this body-mind unit is a device designed for the specific expression and incarnation of active present love, then anything other than that active present love is a mental illness. And if you recognize that your fruit is that of hostility and fear, that of mental illness, but you accept it as, oh, well, this is my intelligence, I'm right, you see, then you affirm living out of mental illness. But when you recognize that you've lost, for whatever reason, even if it's on the subtlest level, that you've lost connection to active present love, then it's time to step back. You remember how often we've spoken about becoming the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions, observing yourself in operation. And if you see that you're bringing forth mental illness, any form of hostility or fear, then step back, own it, admit it, and begin the work of applying forgiveness to remove it. So that's the essence of saying 45, and going into 46. Yeshua says, from Adam to John the Baptist, there is none born of woman who is higher than John the Baptist. And this is kind of an interesting statement when he then follows up. So there's none higher than John the Baptist, so that his eyes will not be broken. And you look at that one and you go, what the heck? And if you read commentaries on this, some of the commentaries are just silliness that are not even relative to what Yeshua was talking about here. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But I have said, he shall be among you as a little one, shall know the kingdom, and shall be higher than John. Let's read that again. Is out of the standard brain cells of the world, try to make sense of this. From Adam to John the Baptist, there is none born of woman who's higher than John the Baptist. That's a lot of people. And he's saying John is the pinnacle. And then, and here I think he's speaking of the whole, from Adam to John the Baptist, for all those years. He says, so that his eyes will not be broken. What is he talking about? Well, remember that we've talked about this whole game of perception. The Course in Miracles says, perception is a skill made up by you to take the place of what the Creator gave you in creation. Everybody thinks that they look with their eyes at what's going on in the world and that they're seeing what's out there. And they're committed to that. Don't break my eyes, we could say, in that I saw what happened. And no one from Adam to John the Baptist, including John the Baptist. I mean, John the Baptist had the highest level of, what Yeshua is saying is, he has the highest level of intellectual, perceptual awareness of anybody that's existed. But guess what? He's lower than the child. And it has to do with this belief that perception, that the constructs of your mind are telling you the truth about something other than yourself. You remember that Harvard research that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. When you look with what you think are your eyes and you think you're looking outside of you, what you're looking at is a picture painted on the inside of your eyeballs. Metaphorically, we could speak of it as painted on the inside of your eyeballs, made of 9 bits of information out of, well, in the Harvard research, 10,000 brain cells are firing 9 bits of data. That's what makes up perception. It's been estimated that perhaps in that same time frame, which is about a 25th of a second, there are potentially available from the Creator's world, from the world of actuality, 20 trillion bits of data. John was living in perception. John was living in the 9-bit mind. So he had the highest levels of intellectual capacity, and he was still stuck in his eyes. He was still thinking that he was looking at what was going on out there. Carbon-based memory, that is the mind of man, that's represented by John the Baptist. He has this highest level of intellectual perception, of which the perceptual mind is capable, and that's versus the mind of Christ. What Yeshua is inviting people into is a whole different mind. And he's saying, John, I mean, he is the pinnacle of intellect, but he's nothing compared to the little child. So this quantum leap in comprehension, intelligence, and being happens when you break your eyes. John could not free himself of perception. Yeshua introduced a tool with which to free yourself of perception. It's called forgiveness. It has nothing to do with letting somebody else off the hook. It has to do with, in the context of this statement, breaking your eyes, collapsing the constructs of your mind so that you get to start to look into actuality. You get to move out of that intellect, out of that I know state into direct awareness of the actuality as created by the Creator. So your eyes are now broken. You want to break your eyes. I'm not saying you want to destroy your physical instrument called the eyes. They're useful. They're an instrument, but they are not the source of truth. So John could not break his eyes, could not free himself of perception, and that's why Yeshua said he was the highest in the realm of man. And you remember that John the Baptist was called the raving maniac in the desert. He was eating locusts and honey. What does that mean? Well, remember, the desert is the unconscious. We're not talking about a hot, sandy place. Now, if you are locked into your perceptual mind, if your eyes are the source of your reality, then you have no clue of the actuality of the Creator's world. You can make all sorts of things up and you can pretend knowledge, but there is no clue until you break your eyes, until you collapse perception. And when you collapse perception, you get to have that near-life experience. You get, even if it's just at first, or even if it's just an instant, you get to collapse the construct of the mind. Be for an instant, because the mind is so fast, that mind of man is so fast at coming back with another piece of its visual insanity. So eating locust and honey, John is in poverty. He's eating locust, and honey would be symbolic of the sweetness of the world. There are wonderful things that we get to experience when we live out of perception. But if we live out of perception alone, that honey that fed John and made him the highest of the high, all the way through all of humanity, to the point where Yeshua shows up and says, now I'm going to show you how to break your eyes. I'm going to show you how to collapse perception. And while the sweetness of accomplishment and intellect and all the, the highfalutin stuff you can do out of your non-being mind, and, we can have fun. It's cool. We've got a world to experience. But where you experience it from is key. Why did you call John the raving maniac in the desert? And he was the forerunner of the Christ. Why do those two things go hand in hand? If you are in the desert, if you are functioning out of the unconscious and your eyes have not yet been broken, then you must meet someone. If you're ever going to live in the actual mind of Christ, the mind of love, literally the mind of the Creator is your birthright to live out of, and perception is poverty city compared to the mind of the Creator and what it makes available to you. The phenomenon that is just beyond comprehension to those living on the level of John the Baptist. So why did he call him the raving maniac in the desert? If you are ever going to break your eyes, if you're ever going to step into the true human mind, which is the mind that Christ lived in, remember, John the Baptist symbolizes the Antichrist, the mind, carbon-based memory that goes against. There's the mind of Christ, the mind of love, and then that which goes against it, carbon-based memory. Remember, if you take your body into the lab and you say, here, break this down, tell me what elements it's made of, the primary element of your so-called body is carbon. 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons. The mind of love, and then that which goes against the mind of love. And whatever is in you that's based in any form of hostility or fear is carbon-based memory, is the Antichrist. It goes against you living. When there is something in you that's based in some form of hostility or fear, that through something that happens in the actuality is resonated, and you get sucked into your eyes, and you believe what your eyes tell you, that because of your denial, you project what's going on inside of you out there, and you are a member of the one world universal religion of blame, and it's all somebody else's fault. Perception. When you break your eyes, it isn't about fault anymore. You start to see directly the underlying why is this happening to me again experience that's being played out through projection. So if you're ever going to awaken to that true mind that you're designed to live out of, which the child lives out of. Remember he says, John's the highest, and go to the child, go to the newborn. Remember that earlier session where he says, you want to know about the actual life? And we just, this last week we got to spend hours holding this little one that has only been in the world for 6 weeks. He said, ask that one about life. So you're going to run into someone who's going to show you your own personal desert, going to resonate what's in your unconscious. And you will do one of two things. You'll blame them and get pissy with them. You'll have a nasty word to say to them. You'll use the voice. You'll give them the look. You'll be sure they're the problem in your life. You'll walk away going, why are they causing all this to happen in me? Why do they cause all this frustration? Why do they make me so mad? And that's all the mind of man. That's all John the Baptist level stupidity. You're going to have to meet him, the one that shows you your raving, maniacal self. And that gives you the opportunity to begin to do your work, the opportunity to wash your own unconscious. And that's not required by the little one that he speaks of. For that one is not yet the newborn. I look at Lincoln. I hold Lincoln 7 weeks. He's into his 7th week in the world. And he hasn't got a clue about perception yet. He's not locked into his perceptual mind. Shake all the wonderful things in the world and go look at all these fun things and create outer direction, which is what happens with most children. We're going to do our best to also show him that there's an inner world where the true richness of life is. And rather than locking him into a 9-bit mind, let him know he has a 9-bit mind, and it's his advisor. It carries information, it carries energy, but it's not where life is found. Most people, once they get past that infancy stage, life is found in their eyes, in the world that they see. And that has to be broken, and it's forgiveness that does that. So John the Baptist, Yeshua, agreed to do a baptism. He agreed to go get water poured on him, which was a ritual in that tradition, in that Judaic tradition. But you'll notice he never imposed that on others. There are people today who the whole game is about baptizing in water. It is a symbolic washing. But Yeshua came and took them out of the symbol, because you can take somebody, you can pour water over their head, you can say they're baptized, you can say now their sins are forgiven. And they go on with their old hostility and fear. Or they go deeper and deeper into learning about hostility or fear. Symbolic washing does not accomplish anything. It is a symbol. Yeshua brought the real thing. That commercial, the real thing? He baptized. And think about this. Remember, the word sin simply means an energy that's off the mark. It's an archery term. How do you remove sin? How do you remove the energetic dynamics from your structure that don't belong? How did he do it? He didn't pour water on them. He used a sacramental breath. That's what still point breathing is about. Quantum still point takes it to the next level. So this sacred breath, to recognize that the gift of life, the gift of breath is the gift of life. In the ancient Aramaic, where it talks about, the Greeks talk about God sending out his spirit, it doesn't say that. It says it sent out his breath. And you watch people when they're in trauma and upset and disturbance, and what do? They shut their breath down. They lock down, and that locks them into carbon-based memory. So there's a washing process. And the deeper you've been ensconced, the sooner you get to know carbon-based memory is not the truth, and its hostilities and its fears and its generational patterns and its rages and its hatreds and its vengeances and its blame, and it's always somebody else's fault. The sooner you get to know that, the easier it's going to be to get free of it. So what are you going to need to wash? Well, how much time, how many conversations have you had based in blame? How many people have you pointed your rage and your fear at? That's how much forgiveness you're going to have to do. You know, we've read before Francois Fenelon. Back in the 1700s, here's what this man wrote. He's talking about what's going to have to be washed in order to move from the level of John the Baptist. John is the highest in the realm of intellect and perception, but he is lower than the low of the children, because the children are still living in direct relationship with the actuality. They haven't been locked into their perception, into their eyes yet. So the eyes are going to need to be broken, and then what will come is what needs to be washed, what needs to be dealt with, what needs to be forgiven. Fenelon, again, back in 1700, wrote, "As the light increases, we see ourselves to be worse than we thought. We're amazed at our former blindness as we see issuing forth from the depths of our heart a whole swarm of shameful feelings like filthy reptiles crawling from a hidden cave. We never could have believed that we harbored such things, and stand aghast as we watch them gradually appear." When you drop the projection that this is your rage, your fear, your guilt, your blame, your sadness, your hurt, your pain, your hatred is all about somebody else and caused by somebody else, you will stand aghast when you look at what comes. And they, as Fenelon says, they will only gradually appear. If you were to literally, if you were to simply open the veil of the temple fully, and the veil of the temple is the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious, it wasn't a purple curtain in a church. If you were to open that fully in one shot, you would go stark raving mad. I mean, literally stark raving mad, and you would be institutionalized for life. If you were to look at what's carried around in your unconscious directly in one fell swoop. Nobody could handle it. So they gradually appear. Fenelon goes on and says, but while our faults diminish, so as you do your work, you're weakening your faults. While our faults diminish, the light by which we see them waxes brighter, and we're filled with horror. Bear in mind for your comfort that we only perceive our malady when the cure begins. So he's saying, you know, this is a wonderful thing, although it's hell. Because to be able to start to look at it directly, rather than projecting it, rather than the terrors and the horrors and the evils and the insanity, the mass, crazy, vicious, vile insanity of those who live out of their unconscious state, those who live out of carbon-based memory. I mean, the horror of it is just unfathomable. I mean, you look at things like the Holocaust, or you look at what, you know, the tyrants down through the ages have done. You look at how human life has been compromised and destroyed. So Fenelon finishes off as he speaks about the horror you're going to look at. Bear in mind for your comfort that we only perceive our malady when you only start to see this as a direct thing that is your own, rather than projecting it into your brain's image of other. You only get to start to see that when the cure begins, when you start to do your real inner work. See that. 1931, a man named Nikolai Berdyaev wrote a book called The Destiny of Man, and he wrote about this too. And he says, knowledge requires great daring. It means victory over ancient primeval terror. It must also be said of knowledge that it is bitter, and there is no escaping that bitterness. Particularly bitter is moral knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. He says, but the bitterness is due to the fallen state of the world. What's he saying here? Basically what he's saying is, when your true mind, when in the true state of being, you comprehend what humans have done and the total and complete needless suffering that's been imposed on humans is a bitter pill to swallow. To recognize from being that all of the horrors that have been done down through the ages, all of the wars, all of the suffering. You know, there was a group in Canada that did research on war, and they came up with, you know, in the last 6,000 years, there have been approximately they estimate 6 billion people slaughtered by other human beings. When you look at that and from being, you recognize that all of that was a waste. That's what Nikolai here is saying. He's speaking of the bitterness of that pill. There is a deadly pain in the very distinction of good and evil, of the valuable and the worthless. So what I hear him saying is that you're really going to have to stay connected with your very being to be able to look at that, to look at the horrific suffering that's going on in the world today and has gone on for thousands of years on the planet, and to recognize that it has been totally and completely unnecessary. I believe that's what he's speaking about here with the bitterness. And in part, what Fenelon is speaking about when he says, while our faults diminish, the light by which we see them waxes brighter, and we're filled with horror. And I speak of this because this is a stage in the healing process. If we're ever going to truly, fully embrace the mind of Christ, the mind of love, this isn't a religious idea. It means to live in the world, in your family system, out of that direct mind, literally, of God, of love, then you're going to have to deal with the generational patterns in your own genes, and you're going to have to look on them. It is the loss of sanity of one who looks prematurely. When I say prematurely, I mean one who looks without having taken the time to develop skills. Literally, this is what causes people to go nuts. Carl Jung wrote that the demise of society would not be a physical threat, but instead mass delusion, a collective psychosis, he called it. Greater than all the physical dangers and the tremendous effects of delusional ideas, which are yet denied reality by our world-blinded consciousness, Jung says, our much-vaunted reason, boundlessly overestimated will, are sometimes utterly powerless in the face of unreal thoughts. Jung is saying that the destruction of the world at this stage with so much unresolved generational trauma is going to be to buy into the generational patterns of the past, carbon-based memory, that level of intelligence that comes through thinking that you're seeing something outside of you, when in fact what you're looking at is your own thought disorders projected. So Young goes on to say, anything new should always be questioned and tested with caution, for it may very easily turn out to be only a new disease. In other words, as long as one is living, we've talked about the power-person dynamic, as long as one has not resolved their own power-person dynamics, anything that's engaged in, when that's unresolved, it's going to be turned back into the power-person dynamic. It runs the world. That's why it takes time. Paul understood this, I think, when he's talked about, there are certain ones there that are new in the process, they're young in the process. You don't give them meat. You don't hand them the whole core of what needs to be looked at. You have to feed them slowly, bring them along, strengthen them, so that they don't play that power person dynamic out again and again and again. And so, again, Jung says anything new should always be questioned and tested with caution, for it may very easily turn out to be only a new disease. That is why true progress is impossible without mature judgment. And mature judgment, I would offer, is judgment that is free of the power person dynamic. If the power person dynamic is involved and still in the unconscious, then it will simply be rendered as the truth about this new thing that somebody came up with. As long as people are living, as long as people have not done the true inner work of healing and awakened the mind of Christ, the mind of love in them, mature judgment is impossible. And they've got a story about 1,000 different things, and being very devout religious members of the one world universal religion of blame, they'll tell you about this story and how it's out there and it's out to get you and you're in trouble. And if you're stuck in it, then you're lost. So the power person dynamic, Jung, you'll remember, we've quoted before, he talks about the wolf inside the man. The wolf inside the man is the power person dynamic. So Jung says the wolf inside the man, or woman, of course, is far more a threat to human existence than external forces. And there'll be people out there who are terrifying you with how this one and that one, and look at this, and, here are the whatever they've projected. Whatever they think is out there. Remember that when one lives in denial, and denial in this work is thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. When I live in denial, I literally dissociate from a part of my own mind. I've now created another layer of unconsciousness in myself, another layer of what locks me into playing out of a mind like the mind of John the Baptist. It seems supremely intellectual and supremely understanding, but it's missing the ownership. Its membership is the one world universal religion of blame, and so its conversation's always about something out there that's out to get us. And that's playing out the unresolved power person dynamic. That's the wolf inside the man. And what Jung says is the wolf inside the man is far more a threat to human existence than external forces. When mental forces, and here we're talking about the projection, the conversation about something out there. See, it's out there, the thing that's out to get you. That's what you got to watch for. Person is telling you that the thing that's out there is what you got to watch for, has not yet done the internal work. Has not yet developed the brain cells. And, they may be brilliant in their assessment of it, just like John the Baptist was brilliant in carbon-based memory and his assessment of it. But he was a moron. He was the lowest compared to the newborn child who had not yet been locked into perception and projection. So I'm going to go back and read that whole statement again from Jung because it's so important here. He's talking about the power person dynamic. Would be my offering. Jung noted that the wolf inside the man was far more a threat to human existence than external forces. When mental forces become so toxic as to harm our overall well-being on an individual and collective level, a psychic epidemic can result. We see all kinds of people that are out there chasing, you look at the whole political scene today, and what are people chasing? You look at the violence, and you look at the vile thought. I was reading this morning with all this tragedy going on in North Carolina. There is a mind out there that's twisting things so horribly that the rescue efforts and the work being done of support in the community, especially in North Carolina, they actually had to stop it. They had to halt it because the threats of violence that were coming from those who were living in the lie, from those who brainwash people with lies. And so the very people being helped are turning on and attacking those who are coming to help them because of this psychic epidemic that has taken over the world. And Young goes on to say, modern society is prone to collapse due to a pandemic of delusional ideas. You listen today in the world, and there's this pandemic, far, far more tragic than COVID was. This pandemic, far more threatening, of delusional ideas. What's a delusional idea? One that comes from denial, dissociation, and projection. Somebody out there is the problem. And when I say somebody out there is the problem, I'm saying I don't have to deal with me. Well, the first order of business, if you're ever going to escape from that whole game, is you have to do the work inside yourself of cleaning up your own unconscious and arriving in the world as the active presence of love, no matter what's going on. Now you can be freed from the delusional idea and you can bring healing to the world. But if you're pointing your finger at something or somebody out there, then you haven't done that work yet. Be my offering on statement 46 from Yeshua. And let's just go back and review that to put this whole conversation in context. Statement 46. From Adam to John the Baptist, there is none born of woman who's higher than John the Baptist, so that his eyes will not be broken. Again, John the Baptist is the highest of the intellect, functioning with the most supreme intelligence in perception and what comes from carbon-based memory. But remember that perception is a world made up by us. Creator gave us in creation. And it leads to blame. There's always somebody to blame, and that somebody is always somebody outside. And in the Aramaic sense, you are also your own neighbor. So if you're laying the blame on self, blame is another layer that comes from hostility or fear. To be freed from that, I recognize I've been in error, and I bring that forward because I recognize I have work to do. It's a whole different game than blame. So from Adam to John the Baptist, there is none born of woman who is higher than John the Baptist, so that his eyes may not be broken. But I have said, he shall be who shall be among you as a little one, shall know the kingdom, and shall be higher than John. This work of Yeshua is an invitation to be higher than John, to free yourself of carbon-based memory, to free yourself of the blame game, to actually recognize that something or someone's got to show up to show you your own blame, your own hostility, your own fear, and then the application of forgiveness collapses that, and you get to awaken to that mind of Christ in you. And then saying 47. Well, we're at 147. So let's just take a moment and see. We've had a couple of shows where we played a recording rather than being here live, and that may have aroused some questions. So if you're out there in listener land, and especially if you're listening on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you're listening to the show directly, and then if you push 1, that raises a hand. And so based on what we've said so far, does anything I've said arouse any questions, any thoughts? And if so, push 1. Let's have a conversation about it. So if you're out there in listener land, have any of the shows that we've played, pre-recorded, aroused any questions for you? Is there anything that you need support with at this moment? And or any questions about what I've shared in the first 3 quarters of the show? We've got about a little less than 15 minutes left, so we're down to about a quarter of the hour. Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
It's all quiet. Actually, we only have 11 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised it hasn't stirred something for somebody.
A hand just went up.
Oh, great. Let's say hello.
Miss Susan, 610, you're on the air.
Hey, hi.
Hey, young lady.
Hearing all that and considering what's going on in the world, and you do bring it up, I was struck because Dietrich Walzak has posted a very short clip about how people are feeling overwhelmed. And of course, you're emphasizing that it's our stuff, nothing is overwhelming us. And yet he's offering a 10-day retreat in Costa Rica for people to do the work that you're talking about, to take back your center and realize you're choosing how you react. And he's even offered a little a Zoom pre-retreat meeting just to have people decide whether they should be coming to that, whether they want to. I can send you that whole thing if you want. I think I have the link here still. Yeah.
Sure, please do. I'd love to see what he's doing.
Yeah, it's obvious that he's finding all of this, as we all are, a huge challenge. It's pushing us into the realization that we have to keep doing our work or we're just not going to be okay. So
there is work to be done for sure.
I know. I'll send it to Jeanie because I sent you a text the other day and I don't even think it got there. I'm not sure which number I should be texting you at, but I'll send it to Jeanie Paste.
Okay.
All right, here it comes, Jeanie. No explanations at all, just that's it. It's a very short invitation. I sent it to my son, Jonathan, because he would be free. It turns out his sailboat isn't going to be ready until mid-December, which means he probably won't get to sail till spring unless he can get a couple of days and get out of the north. And but it's been a big challenge for him because he had made those plans in order to be part of his midlife crisis healing program. He left medicine.
Right.
And he's having a hard time with all that. So I thought it might be good. It's amazing how relevant all the Thomas stuff is to right now. It's like could have been written yesterday.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things we're looking at doing, actually, now that we're back here and settled, we have done an intensive at a local retreat center about 20 minutes from our home here.
Nice.
I've been thinking about communicating. It's a really beautiful center, very comfortable place. Been thinking about communicating with them and doing another residential intensive. So we may do that sometime in the near future. I'm going to open a conversation with them and see what their availability is. So keep your ear for that one too.
Must feel good to be getting back in that saddle. It's amazing how how Zoom appeared just when everything shut down. So we didn't lose contact with each other, but the contact was changed a lot. And we know a lot more now, so we can go back into the public marketplace.
Right. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with how well the Zoom intensives worked, and that people felt that, in some ways it was even better than a live intensive because they had facial contact. As we were doing the work, they could see everybody in the class, could see their faces and stay in communication with them. So that was kind of an interesting shift when Zoom came along. It was quite helpful. But then it doesn't have the possibility for the hands-on energy field work and such that comes with still point breathing. And so we'll see how that all falls in place.
Yeah. So you're going to probably keep up both, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to rock on in both arenas, in all three arenas, including the radio show. And, of course, we're building the fourth arena. Our YouTube channel is building and happening thanks to a couple of volunteers who've stepped late and are converting our radio shows to MP4s so that they can be put on YouTube. I think we're up over 1,000 videos now on YouTube, so that's kind of cool. It's building.
If you ever got to the point where you retired from this, which I can't imagine you would, and
not in the plan.
You looked back over everything you did, you'd already be astounded. It's amazing.
Yeah, there is no retirement in my plan. I plan to be doing this in 20 years and 50 years and 150 and 300, 500 and 1,000 years. So there's no retirement plan here.
Okay. How about you, Jeanie?
And of course, you've got on your calendar our New Year's Eve party at Heartland in 4949, December 31st. So we're rocking on.
Along those lines, I was reading about I think it's Catherine Labouré, a Catholic nun, and she was known to, they exhumed her body long after she died, and she was in absolutely perfect physical shape, dewy skin, fresh, preserved. But they also have photographs of her at the end of her earthly life. She did die in the body, and her body was obviously in very poor shape. So there was some kind of regeneration that went on in the tomb, and of course, anybody who's going to be a skeptic, me included, might say, gee, maybe that's a wax reproduction of her younger self or something. Maybe they've been fooling around with this. I don't know what to make of it. I'm trying to just stay open to the possibility.
Transformation.
Yeah. But you're talking
so
about...
what if, if that's all fake and it's all just wax and all, well, okay.
Yeah.
And if we accepted it and believed it, would that hurt us? I don't think so. But
accepted it. What it? The wax or the real thing?
No, if it were totally fake, if it were totally made up and it was a wax and her body decayed in the grave and, if we accepted that this regeneration took place even after she died, would there be any harm to us?
No.
My take is,
it would be fantastic.
No. But if, in fact, it's true, if, in fact, there is another level of energy that can be operative, might that engaging in that be the opening that would bring the possibility of that energy transformation to us individually and collectively in life now, so that the grave doesn't have to be part of the game.
Yeah, I think so.
That's my take.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going for it.
I love it. That's funny. It's great that you have that much energy. I have a lot of energy, but not what I used to have. So I think, oh my God, I'm too pooped to do all that.
Well, and maybe the next worksheet is going to open the next level of release so that the worn down aspect of life that we bought into, a la the mind of John the Baptist, a la carbon-based memory, what we've been brainwashed with, maybe it's time for that to just be freed, be let go.
Good idea.
Forgive.
Are you still there? Suddenly you...
Michael, you just disappeared.
I am.
Oh, he's back. Okay. Mid-word, you disappeared.
Oh, excuse me.
Yep.
Michael, you're gone again.
So what do you think?
You disappeared again.
Which part?
I'm holding for a response.
Oh, I missed some parts of sentences, so I'm not sure.
You disappeared, Michael,
yeah.
in some of the sentences, and we didn't catch what you said to respond to.
Yeah. Gone again.
So my point was, what if we individually and collectively open the space, and maybe this understanding of what happened to this nun, if we were open to, is that really truly possible? Would that perhaps create the opening that invites that energetic experience to happen inside of us?
Yes, I think so. And that's been proven in many, many other ways, very different ways. But if you look, like you read 1984, that was a projection into the future. That also was realized in the future, partly, I suppose, because we conceived of it. Or one guy did, Orwell, and then it was read widely by other people. So that positive things could be the same way.
Well, when you realize that we are creators, and if in fact the opening words in John in Aramaic are actually accurate, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh, buy into age, and sure enough, age, decrepit, and dying is ours. Buy into the generational patterns of all the hate and rage and trauma and drama and 1984 stuff, buy into it, and we can individually and collectively create it. Choose to go in a different direction, and maybe the whole game changes.
Yeah. Well, I know it's 2 o'clock, so maybe we have to go, but on very close to home levels, I'm finding that to be true. Like if I'm well, my son feels better. Just if I'm well, my son feels better. When
you are healed, you are never healed alone.
Yeah.
So going for it and joining you in that true healing mode. Willing to look at everything that needs to be looked at and bring it to the healing power of active present love.
Love it.
Sweet. Awesome, young lady. Well, it is 2 o'clock, so I'm just going to say thank you for joining us, everybody. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. And blessings. Bye-bye.